Let's talk about what the news of today is I want to talk about. And the first thing we need to talk about is another Detroit Lions coach, and that is Lions defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn. Now, normally, Aaron Glenn is not somebody we should worry about necessarily because, well, as we all know, the coaching carousel is kind of slowing down. For me, let's think about this in terms that are really peculiar. Aaron Glenn just completed his second interview with the Indianapolis Colts to be their head coach. And the reports that are coming out is that Jim Irsay, the Indianapolis Colts owner, was really, really impressed with Aaron Glenn. Was very impressed. Now, let's also understand that this is not the second interview for a team that Aaron Glenn has done. He also has conducted a second interview for the Arizona Cardinals. So right now, Aaron Glenn is very much in the thick of it to potentially become the next head coach for two NFL franchises. Those being both the Arizona Cardinals and the Indianapolis Colts. Now, normally I would be like, this isn't that big of a deal because last year we went through this whole thing with the freaking Saints and the Broncos. But now there are two vacancies that are open that are really eyeballing the potential to take Aaron Glenn. Last year, it was really just primarily the Saints, and then at the last minute, the Saints decided to hire Dennis Allen as their new head coach. But at this point, what real how do I describe this? How do I put this? What head coaching candidates that are out there would realistically be a better option than what Aaron Glenn is right now? Not really any. So for me, it's like I take a look at what is going on right now. The fact that Aaron Glenn has gotten two interviews with two separate franchises. The Indianapolis Colts owner said apparently was very impressed with him. Plus, on top of that, you have to consider this as well. The new GM of the Cardinals, has ties with Aaron Glenn. Back when Aaron Glenn was with the Texans, I believe in 2002 to 2004, the new GM of the Cardinals was actually on the team of the Texans. So there is a connection there. There is a prior relationship. There is a good relationship between those two. So realistically, in my opinion, I think Lions fans seriously need to consider and get accustomed to the fact that we might not have Aaron Glenn back next year. I'm going to say this right now. In my honest opinion, I would expect news by the end of this upcoming week, so by the end of Friday next week, that the Lions are either going to have or not have Aaron Glenn back. Because usually after the second interview, usually by that time, teams have pretty much come to their decision on whether or not a guy is in or out. So in my opinion, the news has already come out that Aaron Glenn has gotten two interviews by both squads, both teams. And on top of that, he's considered a finalist for the Cardinals. And as I just reported, that has come out, Jim Irsay has been really, really impressed with Aaron Glenn in that second interview. So in my opinion, I would say that the likelihood that Aaron Glenn comes back is getting smaller and smaller every day. I honestly think Aaron Glenn is more than likely not coming back this year. I think he's more than likely going to be a head coach for either the Colts or the Cardinals. Now, as far as which one he's going to take, I couldn't tell you. There's reasons for one or the other. The Cardinals, obviously there's the prior connection with the GM there. For the Colts, I mean, you just have to consider the fact that the Colts have a very good roster. The problem with them is that they don't have a quarterback right now. And the Colts are in the top 5. So if the Colts wanted to go and get themselves a quarterback, that would be a good boon, a good way to start out for a new head coach, which if that's what Aaron Glenn gets, it's not exactly the worst circumstances to be under. So just simply saying, we got ourselves a couple of comments here really quickly. Let's see what we got here. Let's see here. Andrew says, hi. How's it going, Andrew? Patty Grimes says, greetings from Georgia. Nick Gunjack says, what's up? Robin's Nest says, any doubt the culture has changed? All good. Robin's Nest says to Patty Grimes, small world, lived in the Savannah area for a spell in Georgia. Robin's Nest also says Aaron Glenn gets the D to a top 10 next year and he will triple his value. I just don't see him leaving. Yet, if he goes, God bless and good luck. Next man up. Lions coaches being hired as head coach is amazing. Well, here's the thing, Robin, and here's the thing to everybody else that's out there. Let's first and foremost understand what this means for the Lions if Aaron Glenn gets hired as a head coach. Number one, first and foremost, understand this. The Lions have not had a head coach that have not had an assistant coach, whether it was a positional coach, a defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, hell, even a special teams coordinator. They have not had a coordinator or coach that has been hired to become another team's head coach after leaving the Lions since Chuck Knox in the 1970s. He went from being, if I recall correctly, the offensive line coach for the Lions in the 70s to being the Rams head coach in the 70s. So that right there would show just how much the NFL has reevaluated the coaching staff, the coaches that the Lions have. The fact that you have such serious interest in the Lions coaches to become head coaches shows that the NFL, the teams of the NFL, have taken a completely different perspective to what these coaches are. And in essence, what they're doing is they're valuing what Dan Campbell as a head coach is doing. Because the offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson, defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn, all these other coaches, they are learning from Dan Campbell, which means the NFL likes what Dan Campbell is doing. Now, on the other flip side of this coin, this is also good for the Lions in one other way. If, and I say if because it's not guaranteed, though it is looking more likely, if Aaron Glenn should happen to leave the Detroit Lions and become a head coach somewhere else, that means that the Detroit Lions will get compensatory picks for him leaving. And there's a reason for this. Number one, it's because according to the rules, since he is African-American, there is the whole, how do I put this delicately? Because I don't want to upset people. Because of his ethnicity, because of that, he's considered a minority. So that gets the Lions picks. But also at the same time, because he is taking an upgraded position from his defensive coordinator job to a head coaching job, should that happen, that means the Lions also get picks in that sense. So here's what would happen. If Aaron Glenn becomes the head coach of either the Cardinals or the Colts, and again, that's no guarantee, but like I said, it's looking more likely, the Lions would get two third-round compensatory picks. They would get a third-round compensatory pick in this year's draft, so in 2023, and then they would also get a compensatory pick in the next draft in 2024, a third in the 2024 draft. So they would get two third-round draft picks. So in my opinion, getting those are two pros to Aaron Glenn being hired. One, it shows that other teams are liking, they're digging, they are approving of what Dan Campbell is doing as a coach. Number two, the Lions get some sort of compensatory picks out of the whole deal as well. However, though, losing Aaron Glenn, I don't know what that's going to do to this defense. Now, obviously, I can see there's a comment in here from Nick who says, who steps in as the new defensive coordinator? Well, in my opinion, the Lions are kind of in a bind if Aaron Glenn leaves. And here's the reason why. Number one, if Aaron Glenn leaves, as you say, who becomes the new defensive coordinator? Well, if Aaron Glenn leaves, the most likely answer, in my opinion, would be an internal promotion. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. I think the most qualified person would probably be Kelvin Shepherd. Kelvin Shepherd is a former NFL linebacker. He's done very well with the linebacking core as a group ever since he became the coach 2 years ago. So if the Lions were to internally promote, I would go with Kelvin Shepherd. Now, if they decided to go outside the building, that's where things get a little tricky because of the fact that there's just simply not as many qualified defensive coordinators now. Case in point, Mike Zimmer, he's now with Deion Sanders, that is, out in Colorado. He's his defensive coordinator. Vic Fangio just became the defensive coordinator of the Miami Dolphins. So you start getting a little, and there's the other dude that I just thought about was DeMeco Ryans. He just became the head coach of the Texans. So it's like the defensive coordinators that are out there are not exactly very inspiring. You could potentially pick Terrell Austin to come back. I know that's a lot of fan favorite idea. I know also you could go after what in the thunder is his name? He's the guy that Brian Flores. I know he's being interviewed for the defensive coordinator. I think it is of the Minnesota Vikings. Also, I think that you could possibly go after a college coordinator or a college individual if you so chose to. I mean, there's a couple of options, but in my honest opinion, if we lose Aaron Glenn right now, I think it's going to do more damage to the Lions as far as the scheme and far as the players, rather than gaining the compensatory picks. I'm just thinking that right now. I don't know if that would be the case because I don't know if Kelvin Shepherd would be much better or better than what Aaron Glenn has provided. But it does beg Lions fans the question, if we lose Aaron Glenn, what then happens next? Rich Adams says, what about Steve Wilks? Steve Wilks would definitely be a good option, in my opinion. I like Steve Wilks as a defensive coordinator. The question is whether or not he would want to be a defensive coordinator somewhere else, because he was literally within a hair's breadth of becoming a head coach again. So I would like it if Steve Wilks would come here if we lose Aaron Glenn, but I don't know if he would come here because, in my opinion, he is literally right there in that wheelhouse of coaches that could very well become another head coach. Patty Grimes suggests Jim Schwartz. Jim Schwartz, I'm trying to remember where he is right now. If I recall correctly, didn't he just become the new defensive coordinator of the Cleveland Browns? I think he just went to Cleveland. I think he's now their new defensive coordinator. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. But yeah, I mean, there's a couple of options. Steve Wilks, if we could entice him, he'd be nice. Terrell Austin, if we could bring him back, would be nice. Like I said, I'm pretty sure Jim Schwartz is out of the picture. I think he's now the new defensive coordinator of the Browns. Kelvin Shepherd as an internal idea, that'd be another good one. But again, it's one of those things where I don't know if Aaron Glenn leaving at this point is a good thing for us. Obviously, there are pros to him leaving, but there's also some cons. So for me, it's one of those situations where it's kind of ticky-tacky.